The biggest political earthquake of 2026 is happening right now in North Carolina, and it actually has absolutely nothing to do with Republicans or Democrats.
No, it really doesn't, which is wild to think about.
Right. I mean, nearly 4 out of 10 voters in the state just completely ripped off their team jerseys. They are flat out refusing to label themselves.
Yeah, and that single decision is basically breaking the billion-dollar algorithms that Washington uses to win elections.
It is a total system failure. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking a giant stack of polls, campaign finance reports, and demographic data.
And we are doing this because we want to show you exactly how this single battleground state could literally decide the balance of power in Washington.
Exactly. Because when you zoom out and look at the national map, Democrats desperately need to grab 4 seats just to flip the U.S. Senate.
Right. And Republicans are fighting tooth and nail to hold on to this razor-thin edge.
Yeah, so the path to control runs through these brutal, tight races in places like Ohio, Michigan, and Alaska. But the absolute crown jewel, the Pier 1 race this cycle, is North Carolina.
Without a doubt. And that is mostly because the incumbent Republican, Tom Tillis, retired. He just left a wide open seat.
Right, and open seats change everything. I mean, usually incumbents have these massive structural advantages, right? They have the name recognition, the donor network.
Constituent services, yeah.
Right.
Taking down an incumbent is so expensive, and statistically, you're probably going to fail.
But a blank canvas, an open seat.
Oh, that is the best return on investment for both parties, which totally explains the flood of money we are seeing right now.
Oh man, the money is just insane. So to really get why the stakes are so high, we need to look at the 2 guys fighting for this seat.
Right.
On the Democratic side, you have Roy Cooper, very popular, 2-term former governor.
Yeah, he crushed his primary, took like 92% of the vote.
Totally dominated. And he built this massive early war chest. He pulled in $13.8 million just in the first quarter of 2026.
$13.8 million is a huge haul for the first quarter.
It really is. And then on the Republican side, you have Michael Whatley. He comes from the party infrastructure, right?
Yeah, he is the former chair of the Republican National Committee. He got the nomination with about 64% of the vote.
And he had a big endorsement from Donald Trump.
He did. But the interesting thing is Whatley only raised $5 million directly in that same quarter.
Okay, so wait. On paper, that is a $13.8 million to $5 million gap. That looks like a total blowout for Cooper.
It does look like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know that completely ignores how modern campaigns actually work.
Right. The outside money.
Exactly. A Republican super PAC, the Senate Leadership Fund, they just dropped $71 million into North Carolina to back Whatley.
Wait, $71 million. Just dropped it in.
$71 million, yeah.
Wow. This feels like a basketball game where, one team totally dominates the first quarter, and then the other team just subs in a $71 million star player.
That is a great analogy, but we have to remember a super PAC dropping that kind of cash isn't the same as just handing Whatley a check.
Because they can't coordinate, right?
Legally, no, they cannot coordinate with his campaign at all. So it's actually a lot more like a hostile corporate takeover.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, the super PAC acts as this outside entity with unlimited funds. They do all the dirty work, all the negative attacks, so the actual candidate can keep their hands clean.
So they just focus entirely on destruction.
Exactly. The Senate Leadership Fund is using those millions to aggressively attack Cooper's record as governor.
What are they hitting him on?
Mostly crime policies. They are specifically targeting the release of violent offenders, and they are hammering his handling of the Hurricane Helene recovery. Yeah, and they are trying to tie him directly to the rising cost of living for working families. They basically want to define his negatives early on.
So they figure if they make Cooper look bad enough, the natural conservative lean of North Carolina will just push Whatley across the finish line.
That is the exact strategy, yes. They position Whatley as the stable alternative.
I do want to pause on the actual spending power of that money, though, because we throw around numbers like $71 million, but candidate money and super PAC money, they do not buy the same amount of influence.
Oh, right, the broadcast rules.
Yeah, broadcast stations are legally required to give political candidates the lowest unit charge for advertising.
Which is a huge discount.
It is a massive discount. But super PACs, they do not get that discount at all. They have to pay premium commercial rates.
Right. So Cooper's $13.8 million in direct cash actually buys way more airtime, dollar for dollar, than the super PAC money.
Exactly. So the super PACs have to spend astronomical sums just to match the candidate on the airwaves.
But, Whatley's allies are totally willing to pay that premium. They know they have a specific demographic advantage in the state.
Because Republicans have won every U.S. Senate and presidential race in North Carolina since, what, 2008?
Yeah, 2008. The standard playbook is basically just drive up turnout among reliable, traditional partisan voters.
But that is the thing, right? That traditional playbook is completely breaking down this year.
It really is falling apart.
Because all that money, the direct funds, the super peak premiums, it is completely useless if you do not know who you are actually trying to reach.
And the voters in North Carolina are just rapidly changing their identities.
Yeah, this is the earthquake we mentioned at the start. Unaffiliated voters are now the largest single voting bloc in the entire state.
39% of the electorate, it is stunning.
39%, that is huge.
And the registration data from the State Board of Elections is just wild to look at. For the first time in the history of the state, registered Republicans officially outnumber registered Democrats.
Okay, give us the breakdown.
It is roughly 38.9% unaffiliated, 30.2% Republican, and roughly 30.2% Democrat. Republicans have a very slight edge over Democrats now.
But this isn't just people moving into the state from out of town.
No, this is active abandonment. People are ditching the parties. Between 2020 and 2024, Democrats lost a net of almost 88,000 voters to party switching.
88,000.
Yes. More than 120,000 former Democrats changed their status to unaffiliated.
Wow. What about Republicans?
Republicans actually saw a net gain of about 2,400 registrations from switchers.
Even after all the recent political turmoil.
Yeah, they took a temporary hit right after the January 6th Capitol riot. They lost about 11,000 voters then. But they bounced back and gained a net of 2,400 overall.
Okay, I am really struggling to understand the math here.
I know it sounds counterintuitive.
Because we constantly hear that younger generations, Gen Z, millennials, they lean heavily progressive on most issues. So as they age up and start voting, shouldn't Democrats be gaining massive ground?
You would think so, yeah.
Why are they bleeding 88,000 registrations?
Well, it comes down to a deep structural distrust of institutions. Young voters do lean left at the ballot box, but they look at the two-party system and they actively reject the labels.
So they just won't check the box.
Exactly. More than half of voters between 18 and 25 choose to register as unaffiliated. They refuse to join the club on paper.
Ah, okay. So that shrinks the official Democratic numbers because the older, reliable Democrats are passing away.
Right, and they are being replaced by young people who vote Democrat but register as unaffiliated.
So they are basically closet partisans. They act like Democrats in the voting booth, but they hide their identity on the actual voter rolls.
That is a great way to put it. And that behavioral gap completely forces campaigns to change how they track people.
Because 10 years ago, you just bought the voter list and mailed a flyer to every registered Democrat, right?
Yeah, super easy. Today, data brokers have to build these crazy complex models based on your consumer habits.
Wait, like what I buy at the store?
Exactly. They look at what kind of car you drive. They look at what streaming services you pay for, where you buy your groceries, your zip code.
Oh, wow. So they use commercial data to predict how you vote.
Yes. And they bypass your official voter registration entirely. They can predict your leanings with incredible accuracy just based on your lifestyle.
That is slightly terrifying, but also fascinating. So because the electorate is shifting into this massive unaffiliated bloc, the campaigns have to hunt for votes in totally different ways.
Right, and we are seeing a total culture clash in North Carolina between the two strategies.
Yeah, let's talk about the Democrats first. They are leaning heavily into the ground game, and it is being led by their state party chair, Anderson Clayton.
Right, and she's only 28 years old.
Which is incredibly young for a state party chair.
It is, and she is driving a highly specific rural strategy. Now, rural North Carolina is usually an absolute bloodbath for Democrats.
Oh yeah, they lose those counties by what, 80 to 20 margins?
Brutal margins, yes. But Clayton operates on this theory that Democrats lose by those extreme margins simply because they stopped competing. They just stopped showing up.
So what is she doing differently?
She is making sure that every single down-ballot race has a Democratic candidate running. I'm talking town councils, school boards, local judges, every race.
Okay, so the political science term for that is the reverse coattails effect, right?
Exactly.
Because normally, a popular candidate at the top of the ticket, like for president or senate, they pull the local candidates across the finish line.
Right, the coattails drag them up.
But she is betting on the exact opposite.
Yes. The idea is if a local teacher runs for the school board as a Democrat, that teacher is going to knock on 500 doors in their deeply Republican county.
Right, because it's their neighbors.
Exactly. They convince their neighbors to come out and vote for them. And once those neighbors are physically in the voting booth, the campaign banks on them just hitting the straight ticket button.
So they secretly add a vote for Roy Cooper at the top of the ballot, just because they came out to vote for their neighbor on the school board.
That is the goal. And it relies entirely on physical presence. Local messaging.
Like pushing for rural broadband access, right?
Yes, treating high-speed internet not as a luxury, but as a basic economic equalizer for these dying farm towns.
Right.
It is a really slow, grueling process. They are just trying to shave 2 or 3 points off those massive Republican margins, one county at a time.
It is an incredible mental image, honestly. You have this hyper-local, door-knocking youth movement driving their 2001 Honda CR-Vs into these rural towns.
Just trying to scrape together a few extra margins.
Yeah, and they are going head-to-head against Whatley's $71 million TV machine.
Which is built entirely on demographic targeting.
Yeah.
Whatley is leaning into a vastly different stronghold.
Older voters, right?
Exactly. He currently holds a massive 19-point lead among voters aged 65 and older.
And older voters are basically the most reliable turnout demographic in the country. They always vote.
They always vote. And the Republican messaging right now, focusing on crime, inflation, economic stability, it just resonates deeply with retirees who are on fixed incomes.
So Whatley doesn't need to knock on doors in hostile territory.
No. His campaign and the super PACs, they use advanced data scraping to target seniors directly. They blast high-frequency ads onto connected TVs in retirement communities.
Just raining down millions in ads.
Yeah, positioning Whatley as this successful entrepreneur who is going to protect their family's savings from inflation.
Okay, so let's check the score here. We have the rural ground game fighting for literal inches against the senior citizen airwaves. What do the polls look like right now?
Well, based on the early numbers, Cooper is currently leading Whatley overall by about 8 to 9 points.
8 to 9 points. That's a solid lead.
It is. And crucially, Cooper holds a 15-point edge among those unaffiliated voters we talked about.
Wow. A 15-point edge in a block that makes up 39% of the state. That is huge.
It is a massive advantage, but we have to remember that political models account for tightening.
Right, the race will narrow.
Definitely. Once that $71 million in negative ads reaches total saturation, public perception is going to shift. The numbers will undoubtedly tighten up as we get closer to Election Day.
So if this total rejection of party labels is tearing up the playbook in North Carolina, my question is this just an isolated incident? Or is this like a nationwide virus infecting the two-party system everywhere?
Oh, it is definitely national. When you look at the national chessboard, this independent surge is defining races all over the country.
So let's zoom out and look at the map. What are the big themes?
Well, the map is defined by distinct battlegrounds. Take the industrial Midwest, specifically Ohio and Michigan, that is purely a working-class economic fight.
Right. In Ohio, you have the Democrat Sherrod Brown trying to hold his seat against the Republican John Huss.
Yes. And Ohio has trended heavily Republican over the last decade. A lot of working-class frustration with trade and manufacturing losses.
So how does Brown survive?
He survives by heavily distancing himself from the national Democratic brand. He just leans super hard into economic populism.
Makes sense. And then Michigan?
In Michigan, it's an open Democratic seat, and Republicans are rallying around Mike Rogers. They are betting that same working-class economic message can flip the state red.
Okay, so those Midwest states rely on candidates carefully managing their party identity. But then you have states that analysts call the reaches.
Right, the reaches. These are deeply entrenched states where one party is trying to force a surprise upset.
Like Alaska.
Yeah, in Alaska, Democrat Mary Peltola is trying to unseat Republican Dan Sullivan. Alaska has a highly unique voting culture.
They like mavericks.
They really do. They reward mavericks, and they often punish strict partisanship, which gives a moderate Democrat a real fighting chance in a very red state.
And what about Maine? I know Susan Collins is facing a fight there.
Yes. In Maine, you have Republican Susan Collins facing progressive Graham Plattner, especially after Janet Mills dropped out of the picture. That is going to be a very tight toss-up.
Got it. And then down in Texas, Democrat James Solerico is running a heavily funded campaign against a Republican machine.
Right. He is likely facing Ken Paxton or John Cornyn. And Texas is entirely about demographics. Democrats are just praying that the explosive growth in urban centers like Austin and Houston will finally outpace the rural conservative strongholds.
But the states that really mirror that North Carolina unaffiliated earthquake, those are Nebraska and Montana.
Exactly. We are seeing independent candidates making massive waves there, entirely bypassing the two-party system.
In deep red territory, too.
Yeah. In Nebraska, you have Dan Osborne running as an independent against Republican Pete Ricketts.
Didn't Osborne run a really close race in 2024?
He did. And he did it by focusing purely on blue-collar labor issues. He absolutely refused to touch any of the cultural wedge issues that define the national Democratic platform.
Smart strategy. And then Montana.
In Montana, Seth Bodnar is running as an independent, and he has the quiet backing of former Democratic Senator John Tester.
Which is incredible, by the way. I mean, the reporting on Tester is wild. He reportedly called the national Democratic brand poison in rural areas.
Poison, yes. When an incumbent senator from a major party tells his allies that their shared label is literally toxic to voters, the institutional trust has completely evaporated.
Shit, gone.
Now, Bodnar's math in Montana is highly complicated, mostly because traditional Democrats are still on the ballot, so that threatens to split the left-leaning vote.
But the underlying strategy still proves the point.
Exactly. The only way to build a winning coalition in these highly polarized environments is to strip away the partisan baggage.
Because voters look at inflation, they look at housing costs, they look at the gridlock in Washington, and they just conclude that neither established team actually represents their daily reality.
Right. So the data we see in North Carolina, that 39% of voters shedding their labels, it is really just the most extreme, mathematically measurable version of this entire national mood.
Wow. Okay, so bringing all of this data together, the 2026 Senate map is a high-stakes numbers game. Republicans have to defend a microscopic majority. Democrats must flip 4 seats. And North Carolina really stands as the ultimate prize.
It does. It is the textbook example of modern political warfare right now.
Yeah, defined by historic, record-breaking spending that totally bypasses the actual candidates, and a rapidly disappearing partisan electorate where the independent, unaffiliated voter dictates the terms.
You are watching the Democratic strategy of reverse coattails, fighting for literal inches on the ground, clashing directly against the Republican strategy of massive financial resources dominating the airwaves.
Whoever correctly models the hidden behavior of that unaffiliated voting bloc wins the Senate.
That is exactly right.
It is an incredible structural collision. And it leaves me with one final kind of provocative thought about all the data we unpacked today.
Okay, what is that?
We see millennials and Gen Z abandoning political parties by the thousands, right? Democrats lost 88,000 voters to switching in just 4 years. Voters are actively opting out of the system.
They are.
So if this generational trend continues and nobody joins the local committees and nobody signs up for the party newsletters, who actually runs for office in 10 or 20 years?
That is the big question.
Will the traditional Democratic and Republican Party machines even survive a future where the vast majority of voters simply refuse to wear their jerseys?
We will have to wait and see.
We will keep watching the numbers. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.